Mr. Sheets, really appreciate you having me in here in your beautiful home and agreeing to the interview.
Welcome to the house.
Yeah, it's great, and I love your dog. The most
hopefully you won't bark.
Largest, friendliest dog I've ever met. Yeah. So tell my readership is mostly right leaning, right? And you are a Republican.
Yep.
Tell people what would describe you. Who are you? What do you do? And a little bit about your companies.
So I'm a fifth generation Texan. My great-great-grandparents came here in the late 1800s. And so my grandparents were up here in Texoma where my dad and my mom met. He was a early graduated second lieutenant in the Air Force at the Air Force Academy and was up here at Perrin Airfield doing flight training. Met my mom as she was a Miss Sherman pageant contestant and he was her escort, and they got married 3 months later. So we spent our whole life kind of traveling in Air Force bases. I always say I was conceived in Texas and born in Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. But I grew up in Austin, and so I got out of school studying marketing, and my brother and I started a pen and pencil company, and so I'm just kind of a serial entrepreneur. But my faith is also something that's very important to me and central in my life, and so that really took a much more prominent role after I went on a mission trip down to Venezuela in 1997. And I wound up going on staff with this Christian mission agency and spending the next 12 years in being a missionary. I raised support, just like missionaries do, and was going around the world telling people about Jesus. But at that same time, that was right after Patty and I got married. We met here in Dallas in 1995, got married in 96, and then right after we got married, Patty said, "Hey, we need a hobby." I think she was thinking like gardening or antiques, but back then they actually had TV commercials that promoted what the internet was for, and had this lady in a bee suit covered up with bees, and her boys looked down on their mom and said, "See, you can find anything on the internet." And I was like, I always loved honey. So I went over and typed in beekeeping Dallas. Long story short, I wound up buying a bee hive from this gentleman, and he had started this little honey company in 1972, and he was about 75 years old, had cancer, had a hard time getting around, and so I would go around. He had 100 beehives. He had 50 just a couple miles away from where we lived in an apartment down in Plano, and then he had 50 down in Dallas behind Brookhaven College. And so I'd go and help him work bees on the weekend, just because it's fascinating. I mean,
yeah.
And then he was in about 10 local grocery stores, health food stores. So I started getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, going and putting honey on the shelf for him. And then Patty was a school teacher, and it progressed to the point to where then we would go down to his house and his garage at night and start bottling honey by hand in his garage. I remember Patty was like, "What are we doing?" I was like, "I don't know. We're just helping this guy." So summer of 1997, I went on that mission trip in February of 97, so earlier in the year. But that summer, I wound up buying North Dallas Honey Company from Fred for $10,000 on terms. And
it's a good deal.
I had no idea why I was doing it, honestly. But I didn't buy the bees, I just bought the product side. So I hired a beekeeper up in Paris, Texas to bottle the honey, and then I hired a distributor to put on the shelf. And that was pretty much the model of how the honey company ran from 1997 until about 2013, some variation of that. But that same year, I wound up going on staff at E3, and then again spent the next 12 years doing missions, traveling to 88 countries around the world, telling people about Jesus. And we did some cool things, like we created this little tool called an EvangeCube that's got 7 pictures of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And then we also did this thing called I Am Second, which is an online evangelism platform.
The wristbands a lot of people wear. Right?
Yeah. And so I was very blessed to get to provide leadership and lead both of those. And then in 2010, we started focusing on the honey company full time and got into Dallas Fort Worth. We've been in Dallas Fort Worth since 1997, but we got into some Walmarts here locally, and then the following years when I came up with the brand Nature Nates.
Yeah.
And the reason why I did that is because I have my personal cell phone number on the back of every bottle of honey I sold from 1997 until 2014, and talked to every single person, thousands of people.
Did you get a lot of calls?
Oh, yeah. I've got we could talk for 2 days about calls. But I knew why people were eating honey.
Yeah.
And so we started doing so well in Walmart. North Dallas Honey Company, they started bringing it to Houston and Oklahoma City and Albuquerque. And I knew, people eat honey because they think, oh, you're supposed to have local honey. And so I was talking with my wife about rebranding the company, she said, "Oh, you should call it your nickname in college," which was Nature Boy. And I was like, Nature Boy, honey, doesn't have that je ne sais quoi. And so came up with Nature Nates, went and presented it. But when I did it, I really focused on the attributes, of what it's like milk. When you go to buy milk, you go organic or non-organic, and then once you go there, then it's like skim, whole milk, 2%. And so that's why I focused on the attributes, knowing what people are looking for, pollen in their honey, and then raw. And so we launched that in the summer of 2011. And man, within 4 years, we're the #1 brand in the United States. It was just amazing. And so to start from one beehive in my backyard to today, we're probably the largest honey company in the world and have been the #1 brand, for a long time.
Yeah.
So I was I was leading the honey company and sold at the end of 2021, and I didn't have any financial partners, and lots of challenges, up and downs during those years. But it just got to the place where I just couldn't continue to try to organically grow it myself, and so I sold. And I was the CEO up until November of last year, but I've been on the board also, and so stepped away as the CEO for the next CEO to be able to step in.
Yeah.
And but when I made that transition, honestly, I was like, all right, God, what do you want to do next? And we've got a lot of other business activities that we're involved in, but the desires that I had when I was in full-time Christian ministry, wanting to honor God with my skill sets and my abilities and my time, and wanting to help people, was the same way I approached even at Nature Nates. I wanted to honor God, with my business, and then I wanted to help people. And that was both employees and people outside the company. And after I sold, that ethos and that, kind of core desire to make an impact was still there. And I was actually up with Rick Santorum in Washington, D.C., and we were at lunch near National Prayer Breakfast and just talking about this whole thing.
Yeah.
And Rick kind of out of the blue goes, "You should run for ag commissioner." I was like, "Run for ag commissioner?" Excuse me.
You tackled businesses successfully, and so now you've got time.
Yeah.
So the next venture obviously
But
being.
honestly, Tony, I never really wanted to be in politics. I mean,
See, a lot of people say that, and then they get involved.
yeah. It's like his buyer one time. He goes, he was asking about me having my face on the bottle. And he was like, "That's a little narcissistic, isn't it?" And I was like, "Well, this is why I did it," and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, "Yeah, but you put your face on the bottle."
So there's probably some strategy with the buyer of seeing who runs and who's packing their honey. I can understand that. Yeah,
Because most honey companies, they don't have.
they're faceless.
Yeah, and they don't feel like there's someone. I always wanted the image of there was this little old guy in a garage bottling honey by hand, which I did, by the way.
Yeah.
But wanted to kind of create that mystique. So,
Well, you see some of the most successful brands have a face to it, like Aunt Jemima's, right? Used to. I don't think it does anymore.
yeah, Burt's
Quaker
Bees.
Oats. Yeah, Burt's Bees,
I mean,
Quaker
all
Oats.
the Paul Newman.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, it was more successful after Paul died than before he died.
There's some sort of connection with products that have more of a natural, organic sense and having a face to it.
So there was a fundraising statement: people give to people, motivated by a cause.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're going on a mission trip to Africa and you say, "Hey, would you give me $100 for my mission trip?" We do it because we're friends, not because I love Africa.
Right.
And so I thought, wouldn't people rather buy from some person
Yeah.
and love the product? And that's why I really created the whole brand of Nature Nates.
Yeah, I'm going to change my logo and just put my mug on it and see how it goes for me. So would you say that now you've been I assume you've been a Republican for maybe most of your life?
All my life.
All your life.
My parents were hardcore Republicans, actually really involved. So Keith Self was in my parents' Sunday school class, and Keith and Tracy were very good friends of my parents when they were still alive. My dad died in 2012. My mom died last year of Alzheimer's. But Chris Hill, we went to Prestonwood Baptist Church, which is kind of a stalwart of conservative and Republicans. And so my parents, obviously were very involved but that's how we were raised. Just God, country, and family.
So you weren't one of these youth that kind of were Democrat initially and then kind of became conservative later on. Okay.
No.
Got it.
I mean, there was probably a time when I was a youth that I didn't even think about it. And I look at my kids today. My kids are they're passionate about conservatism. Matter of fact, I've got a daughter up in D.C. right now. She's working for a lobby group this summer.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And so she's up there and really loves politics. And so to see your kids love God and love country is probably one of the most fulfilling things, as a dad.
So, as in regards to your experience in like getting in politics, you are traditionally a donor, a funder. You funded. What kind of politicians or groups have you traditionally donated to or supported?
I would say I've been more involved funding Christian ministries and evangelical focuses. And my philosophy historically was, there's some people that give to buildings. There are some people that give to politics, but there are very few people that will give to see the gospel go out around the world. And so Patty and I felt like that was the best use of our money. But over time, I also, had relationships with people that I felt like I really wanted to come alongside and support, like Rick Santorum, or Chris Hill, a buddy of mine, that we were in Scouts together. Our kids were in Scouts. And so wanted to come alongside of him. And so I'm even on the philanthropy side of like Christian ministries. I'm just a very relationally oriented person. And so Patty and I based a lot of our giving just based on people that we believe in. Just like, people that are making investments in the companies, they always say, I bet on the team, right? And so that's probably the way that we approached. And probably the first large investments and contributions I made, candidly, was Donald Trump in 2016. And then I made an even larger, investment this year or this past cycle.
So you were original Trump supporter, which is kind of rare. There's a lot of people that, they were pro Ted Cruz, especially in Texas, because a lot of people forget Trump lost in Texas in 2016. I was on the ground for that. Yeah. And so
not because of you.
Well, I hope not. So you were originally a Trump supporter in the primaries of 2016. Interesting. Okay, over Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
Can I ask why?
It's so funny. I mean, you remember when Donald Trump went broke?
Oh yeah.
Long time ago. I was young.
Bankruptcies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, man, if I had $1 million, I would go give it to that guy because I know he's going to bounce back. And, and so I'd always had some awareness and affinity and respect for what he had done as a business guy. And I really loved the fact that he was a business guy and wanted to get in and use his skill set to go make a difference. And so Norm Miller from Interstate Battery and I were, both came alongside and invested into that. And that was fun to get to do it with Norm. And, and so Norm, Leroy Mitchell from Cinemark and myself, we went up. They had that faith meeting up in New York City, that Huckabee. So I flew up there with those guys and went to that event. And, that was 9 years ago?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it.
In my early 40s, but getting to hang out with those two older guys that were, everybody knew them. And it was pretty fun getting to go up there and go to that event when I was a nobody.
2016 was a fun election cycle for the drama, but I guess it depends where you were at. But it was interesting.
But that meeting up there they had in D.C., I think was kind of the linchpin to help the faith community, because Huckabee emceed the thing up there. And some other evangelical leaders really said, all right, we're going to get behind them. And that's when we really saw things start to change.
Got it. So kind of circling around, obviously your company and your experience, you've been really focused on the agricultural stuff in here in Texas and the agricultural commission position. What is that, for the people that don't really know, what does the agricultural commissioner of Texas do?
I ask people, especially living in Frisco, Texas. I spoke at an African-American church on Sunday, and they invited me to come in, and I said, anybody know what the ag commissioner does? No one raises their hand. And I said, okay, do you eat food? Raise your hand. Obviously, and I said, if you eat food, it matters. because the ag commissioner has some oversight in, farming and ranching, whether it's the organic program or whether it's pesticide application or whether it's, marketing and becoming, the chief marketing officer trying to help sell Texas products around the world, or internal marketing like the Go Texas program.
Right.
But it even goes beyond that from the standpoint of like the school lunch program. A lot of people don't even realize that falls under the purview of the Texas Ag Commissioner. And so feeding 5 million kids, a year in schools is one of the areas that I think is most overlooked, and a great opportunity. I think, what they say, 72%, 73% of kids 18 to 25 currently are ineligible to serve in the military because of health issues.
Yeah.
And so when you think about school lunch programs, especially with financially disadvantaged people, that might be the only potentially good, healthy meal. And especially if they come from single family households, single parent households, and their mom, works 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and they come home and they might not have a lunch or have a dinner that night when they get home. And so I read a statistic that financially disadvantaged kids get 60% of their nutrition from that school lunch program.
Wow.
So it's really important. And I don't think it's ever really been viewed as an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of these other people. I think, the House Bill 25 that just came out, is really trying to take a bigger look at, especially with kids. I think there's a physical education component to really get kids active and get them moving, because it's not just what we eat, it's how we live, right? I mean, kids gaming all the time, kids on their iPhones all the time. We've got to get kids back outside doing things and being engaged. And so that SB 25 does the first step in getting people active, but then educating them and trying to see that the things that you eat and how you eat impact your health. And then it's got labeling and other things associated with that. But, the Ag Commissioner has oversight and ability to make an impact just with that part of the job. So, Ag Commissioner does matter to every single one of us, even though you don't live in West Texas and you're a cattle guy or you're a farmer. And as I talk with people, I had people lining up, coming up to me after church on Sunday saying, man, thank you for just helping me understand. And so I think there's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I've talked with a lot of people, and a lot of people just can't describe what they do, right? But everybody knows Sid Miller. And so, you were a donor of Sid Miller's, I think his largest at one point. And now you're his opponent in the upcoming primary. Can you tell people a little bit about why that is, or why the change? What were you happy with that, Commissioner Miller did, and maybe what you weren't so happy with that's caused you to now run for his position?
Yeah. I'll tell you, I like Sid personally. And so when I was actually, after Rick Santorum said, oh, you should run for Ag Commissioner, which really made me go, huh? Why? And he said, you really focused on trying to create trust in the honey industry. And that was something that was, the vision of Nature Nates was to be the most trusted honey company in the world. The mission of Nature Nates was to honor God and help you and your family live healthy lives. So, this is what I've been doing from a business perspective for a long time, believing that high fructose corn syrup and other processed sugars are killing Americans, killing kids, giving diabetes. And so now I had a dog in the hunt, but I was always like, let's take, natural sweeteners and replace them with processed sweeteners and try to have better products for people to eat. And so that was the help you and your family live the healthy lives component. But the reason why my vision was to be the most trusted honey company in the world, because it is an industry wrought with consumer confusion and deception. And when I first, in 2011, I think, there was this sting that some guy went and pulled a bunch of private label honey off the shelf in like Walmart and Kroger and some other retailers and sent it off to get it tested. And it came back and it was ultra filtered. And the only way that you can know where honey is from is the pollen. And so you can test the pollen, see what the plant origin is, and geographically know where it's from. So when you go over and above to take every single speck of pollen out, they knew it was transshipped Chinese honey, which you weren't allowed to use. And so all these retailers got totally, slammed in the media because they had this fake Chinese honey. Well, their co-packers were the guys that were packing that. And it's not like Walmart was going, hey, get me some transshipped Chinese honey so I can keep the cost down.
Yeah.
And so the honey industry, there was like 3 or 4 big packers at the time, said, well, let's start a validation group called TrueSource, and we'll have oversight to make sure that doesn't happen again. Well, in my perspective, it was the fox in the hen house, and the very people that got busted were now the very people that created their own oversight. And so as a honey company, I wanted to give people confidence in their food and make them feel like what we eat is safe. And so the way I did that is I created testing. I tested all the pollens to know where the honey came from to make sure there was no subverted honey. I tested for antibiotics because bees get sick like people. But you have to treat those bees off cycle when there's no honey production happening. I tested for C3 and C4 sugars. One would be rice syrup if someone was trying to adulterate honey. And the other would be because a beekeeper was feeding his beehive in the wintertime to stimulate the queen starting to lay eggs and grow the population, which you do in the winter because they go dormant. And you're trying to get them ready for the spring nectar flow. But if the weather changes and spring comes too quickly and you still have corn syrup in there, then the bees will treat that corn syrup just like nectar and start to pack it in the honey. Well, some people are allergic, to corn syrup.
Yeah.
And I tested for pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. So that testing allowed me to give consumers transparency into what they were eating and confidence in what they were eating. And ultimately, it developed trust. And so trust through validation. And that's one of the ways I won, and beat my competition. So when I think about today and where people are, we have one of the safest food supply industries in the world with agriculture. I mean, we've got some of the most nutritious, especially in Texas. All the beef, the farming and the ranching is amazing. But there's still a perception issue that people, feel like the things that we're eating are harmful to our diet. And I think that there's a big difference between, like the red dyes and, the things that RFK is really focused on trying to get out in processed foods, ultra processed food, preservatives, things of that nature. But people even think that agriculture, has things. And so my desire in getting involved as an ag commissioner is to help build trust in our food supply, to elevate farmers and ranchers and help them be more successful. The cost of what it takes to go produce food now for these farmers and ranchers has gone up 30, 40% over the past few years. But you know what hasn't gone up 30 or 40%? The 15 cents of every dollar of food that goes in someone's mouth, they get 15 cents. And of that 15 cents, that's got to cover their seed, their diesel, their fertilizer, everything it takes for them to go produce it. So their, the net income has gotten smaller and smaller. In a lot of cases, they're losing money before they even get going. And so, there's a massive disparity between where we are with consumer perception, and it's only growing. You see Dr. Attia or Mark Hyman or Callie Means, who's Surgeon General now, RFK, and all these people are really making people more concerned. So we have distrust, we have farmers that are struggling, and we've got to bridge the divide to build the trust and give farmers the opportunity to grow that 15 cents to maybe 20 cents or 25 cents and get back to a place where farmers and ranchers can viably and financially continue to be in business. We lose farming families every month, every week. We're losing families. It's kind of an old man's business, and we need to make it a young man's business. We need to make it getting in agriculture cool again.
Yeah, I don't think you see a lot of the youth growing up and saying, I want to be a farmer when I get older. I think there was a study recently, they polled American children, and the top careers that they wanted were like YouTuber and professional gamer or something, right? And whatever. And I think China was like doctor, astronaut, lawyer. So we've got a problem, to what you're saying, we've got a problem with getting the youth excited about maybe more realistic, helpful industries.
And that's why I wanted to get in to do this. I mean, when Rick said that, he said, go use your skill set.
Yeah.
And then I talked to my wife, coming back from that, and we pulled up what the ag commissioner's job responsibilities are. That's when she said, man, I can really see that. I've been dealing with pesticides at Nature Nate's for a long time. Farmers beekeepers didn't know where their bees were flying in a 3 to 5 mile radius. Now we've got a better system to where beekeepers and farmers can put into this system and know what's where, so they can try to protect their bees a little bit more. But and I've been dealing with the organic program. We had a 50% share of organic honey, which is huge in America, and yet we even all around the world in USDA certified organic projects, we have glyphosate popping up in Brazil, in South America, in Canada, and other places around the world. And again, it's just ways that people utilize processes in agriculture, and sometimes it doesn't even have anything to do with agriculture. It could be the guys that are going to put in a new road, but they decided, let's go spray Roundup, or glyphosate in there to kill off everything so we can go put the road in. But those bees get in that stuff because they're going to get in pollen, and nectar from flowers. So I just felt like there was, tremendous overlap between what I have done professionally and what needed to be done governmentally. And having been in the nonprofit sector and then being in the business sector, and now I look at this, in this government public sector as an opportunity to bring together people and convene people to work on big ideas, big opportunities, big challenges, and, work through a process, which is what I'm good at. I know how to lead people. I know how to get people all behind a big idea, and I can come to it without a predetermined outcome. And I always tell my team, sometimes I'm a contrarian just to challenge the thought and to make it better. And so I think too many times we just say, well, this is the way we've always done it, and here's the box, and don't ask any questions, and you're going to disrupt the apple cart. But as it relates to agriculture, if there's a perception problem with consumers and there's distrust, then my goal would be to give them confidence. And we do that through going through a process of trying to be the most transparent agriculture industry in the world.
Would you say that some of that, what you mentioned, distrust between the consumers and maybe the agriculture, is part of what inspired you to run against Commissioner Miller? Or maybe a better question is, what do you feel that Commissioner Miller is doing that, inspired you to get in, or not doing?
It's probably more the latter. I mean, again, I like Sid. And when I thought, okay, I'm going to run, I called Sid up and I said, can we go to lunch? And we did. And I asked him, I said, hey, what are you thinking about? Are you going to run again? He said, well, I'm thinking about running. And I said, ag commissioner? He goes, well, I'm, praying about running for a different seat. And I wanted, and I said, I think that's great. I think you should. Because I'd like to run for ag commissioner, and this is why. And kind of explained it to him. And at the end, he goes, I think you should run. I said, okay, well, I just wanted you to hear it from me. And, and so we were leaving, and he said, I think I've really done a good job elevating the role of ag commissioner, because I had about 10 people, say that they wanted to run for ag commissioner. And I said, well, if any of them have represented and sold agriculture globally, over the past 20 years, and took a commodity and turned it into a #1 brand, then maybe you should support them. If not, maybe endorse me. And he just laughed.
Yeah.
So that was, I felt like I wanted to honor Sid out of respect for him and his service to our state and country. But I also, again, I'm a visionary entrepreneur. I look at opportunities and I look at challenges. And I think he and I just have a background difference. He's a nursery tree farmer, and I'm this CPG, product guy of penetrating, creating products that people might want or they don't even know that they want, figuring out how do you source them, how do you manufacture them, how do you do all the costing, how do you get them sold into stores, how do you do distribution, how do you get them sold off the shelf, how do you get them replenished, how do you get a brand building. I mean, it's it's a massive process. When you are a nursery guy and a tree grower, you plant a tree and you watch it grow.
So, with that discussion with Commissioner Miller in mind and that lunch you had, and he kind of expressed, I'm probably going to run for this other position. And,
Which he decided not to.
Right.
And announced.
Right. And so I'm getting to that. So obviously he's decided to run for re-election. Did you have a moment where you were like, well, I should maybe back out since he's going to, or did he call you? I mean,
No. When I launched out as Nature Nates, I didn't go out and beat my competition by trying to sell against them with negatives of saying they don't do this or that. Man, I get people excited and have a vision. But I think whether it's myself or at the end of the day, Sid Miller, the goal from my perspective is twofold: to help build trust in people for consumers and all Texans to have confidence in our food supply, and working with farmers and ranchers to create transparency and confidence in what they do, and for them to be wildly successful financially, more so than they ever have been. So at the end of the day, if people vote and Sid is the guy who's in office, then I'm going to get behind him 1,000%. But I'm going to hold them accountable to go do those things because I still think they have to be done. And if people think that I'm a better candidate, to go and accomplish that based on experiences and background between two guys applying for the same job, I mean, this is a resume, thing. It's not a beauty contest. I mean, if you're going to go, I love Sid. I mean, he looks like the quintessential ag commissioner, right?
He has, I believe,
big old white hat and belt buckle. He talks about people walking up to him. And
do you plan on doing that? You can do the belt buckle, white hat? No.
I do have cowboy boots and even Wranglers.
There you go.
But listen, I've got a cow-calf operation. I've got a big ranch in Guthrie, Texas. We do cutting horses that we buy and train and sell them at the futurity. So I've been in agriculture from a professional standpoint for 25 years.
Yeah.
But I'm not Sid Miller, and I'm not purporting to be Sid Miller. But I am very goal and vision focused. And at the end of the day, whether it's Sid or me, that's what we need to do for Texas farmers and ranchers and families.
And he's a tough opponent. I mean, he's got, I believe, of all Texas politicians, he's got the largest following on social media, right? I mean, for a while, and you probably remember this as well, I grew up here for quite a bit. Like, you couldn't pump gas without seeing his name on the gas pumps. Like, everybody knew him. And, when you ask like a normal person that's maybe not super involved in politics, you ask them about Texas politicians, a lot of them picture somebody that at least looks like or is Sid Miller. And so,
he's going to be a tough competitor.
I was going to say.
Listen, I guess all I've been able to do is take one beehive in my backyard and take a 10,000-year-old commodity that's been around forever and rebrand it under a brand of Nature Nates, and within 4 years becoming the #1 branded honey in the world, and continuing to this day being the #1 branded honey. So I'm gonna, I don't have 1 million followers on Facebook, but I work really hard.
Do you have over 1 million customers though?
You know what? If everybody who watches your interview, go to your pantry and see what's in there. And I've resigned from the company to go and do this because I can't be associated with Nature Nates, and so I'm out, and I left a very nice salary to go and do this, and I'm putting a lot of my own money into this, but I'm not a self-funding guy because this is about believability, faith, in people. This isn't about Nathan Sheets. It's about the vision of what I articulated. So I want to, bring everybody under the big tent we always talk about, and that's going to be through money and volunteers, and then ultimately 51% of the vote.
you kind of touching on what I wanted to get into next. You had a launch event. Man, what was it, like 3-4 weeks ago? Maybe even longer?
May 18th.
Gosh, time just flies by. And many people were talking about the fact that, some GOP leadership showed up. You had Judge Chris Hill, who's obviously phenomenal in Collin County, but, the county or the party, party chair, the Republican Party chair was present. And a lot of people, it raised a lot of eyebrows that the chairman of the Republican Party was showing up to your event. Has he come out and endorsed you, like, publicly?
No, that's not his role. Well, he's for all Republican candidates.
I'll have to kick back you on a little bit on that. He's one of the controversies, and this is whether you're on his side or not. One of the things a lot of people talk about is he does actively pick and choose winners and losers that he supports in the Republican Party. And so that's been a criticism of him, but I digress. That's a whole other story. Going back, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but going back to the question, has he come out and said any sort of endorsements coming from him, or has he given any support?
No,
Okay.
I mean, he did tell me personally, he goes, personally, I'm going to vote for you.
Okay.
Because my wife and I believe, with what you were saying about the vision of what we need for Texas. But he never said, that he was endorsing me. Matter of fact, he said the opposite. He said, as the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, I'm not here to endorse, Nathan Sheets. I mean, I'm here for all Republican candidates. So I appreciate him making himself available. I called him, texted him just a few days out, and honestly, it was just kind of an afterthought of thinking, hey, if you're available, I'd love to have you come. And then, Rick Santorum was going to come down, and I think that was kind of what prompted me, even on Abraham, because Rick, all of a sudden, last minute, that's when the Vatican, when the Pope had died, and Rick had been in Rome, and so he wasn't able to come down. And then Chris, when I went and met with him, he was really one of the first guys I went and talked to.
Your childhood friends, right?
Yeah, I mean, our kids were friends, and we were both leaders in Scouts.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, not we were together in Scouts, but we were leaders in Scouts with our boys. But I mean, Chris and I are personal friends, and so I went to him, and as soon as I talked to him about what I was doing, he goes, "I want to be your chairman for Collin County." I was like, "When?"
There you go.
And so I am very grateful for his enthusiasm. But again, being in full-time ministry, like, Kelly Shackelford from First Liberty, very close friend of mine, and I've invested a lot into what they do as a organization, because what they do is critical, for the United States and for religious liberty and freedom. And so I have a lot of friends kind of in the space of nonprofit, and I think our event, which was amazing, we planned it in about 6 days, and we had over 550 people there for this launch event. Wow. Up at the old Nature Nate's Farms, just about 10 miles north of here. And it was awesome. Someone took a snapshot of the weather, because there was this massive storm blowing in, and you could see it behind us coming up. And then we kicked off at 5:30. And this guy took a picture of the weather map at 5:37, and those clouds went bloop. It kind of came back together. So it was on a lot of fronts. I felt like in some sense it was God just kind of giving me a thumbs up, but I felt very supported and encouraged. And there's a lot of enthusiasm of people wanting to see something change.
Yeah. I want to talk about something maybe a little more controversial, but on a lot of people's minds is the THC ban, SB3, right? You saw almost all but 2 Republicans in the House support the THC ban. It's Dan Patrick's one of his priorities. And then recently, I'm sure Governor Greg Abbott has decided to veto that. And he's sending them back for special session. And one of the things he wants them to cover is more regulation on it instead, potentially. Dan Patrick's put his foot down. He's like, no, I want a ban. And he wants a full-on ban. What's your thoughts on that, especially considering the role you may be going into? What's your thoughts on THC and the industry as a whole?
I think ultimately we'll see how the special session goes when they come back in, and how they decide what direction to go. As a dad, and someone who spends a lot of time, even with my kids' friends, I've seen the destructive nature of pot. They always call it the gateway drug, but it just lessens people's opinion. And I can remember when I was in high school, they had these TV commercials that were trying to promote how bad drugs were for you. And they had these two kids sitting around this, their bedroom, and they look like old rockers, AC/DC poster, and they're smoking pot. And he's like, oh yeah, man, we're just gonna hang out. And you hear the kid's mom yell, Timmy, have you gotten a job yet? And Timmy's like, oh no, okay, Mom, okay.
Sounds like one of those Dare commercials.
Yeah. So that was kind of a, almost a Saturday Night Live take on the impact of marijuana. But I've got family that lives up in Oklahoma City, and I hear from them, how negative marijuana has been in Oklahoma, and Chinese coming in buying up land, and someone even said, and the Chinese mafia is up here even, kind of running this whole thing. I don't know to the validity of that, it's, the role that the TDA has played in times past, if the TDA authored the bill that created the opportunity for hemp, and there's a lack of regulation today. And as Sid has said, even in your interview, what's stopping a 7th grade kid from coming down and getting a Delta 9, taking it back to school, and selling it? And that Delta 9, again, is what I understood Sid to say, was a result of that hemp, product. Then maybe we didn't approach it right from the beginning. And so if TDA was responsible for writing those regulations, and now it's unregulated, and there's all this confusion about, is it legal to have marijuana in Texas or not legal? I know Sid's for, medicinal marijuana.
Do you hold the same position?
No. I mean, I don't really have an opinion. I haven't spent a tremendous amount of time. I always tell my kids, if you don't drink, and I'm not a teetotaler, but I said, if you don't drink, you're never going to sit around when you're older and wish you had drank more. So, the Bible says be sober-minded, and have clear thought. And so whether it's alcohol or whether, it's marijuana, things that cloud or impair our judgment, I just don't think allows us to perform at optimal. Now, I know there are people that are PTSD sufferers from wars, and people dealing with chronic pain. And I have a really good friend, she actually used to work at me at Nature Nate's. Her dad has a serious back injury. He's been on, what's the highest level narcotic that you take for pain?
Morphine?
Yeah, morphine.
Okay.
So he's like on the highest level of morphine that you can be, and has been for like 10 years.
Wow.
And so, and he's in Oklahoma. And so they were going to switch over to do medical marijuana and see how it would go. But the insurance company said, well, if you switch off of that, then we're not going to allow you to go back onto morphine. And so there was like no willingness to even try it. But now, so this guy has continued to be on morphine, and just over time, that just has horrific effects on your body. So I'm not going to try to inject myself, into something that I haven't spent a lot of time really talking to people and understanding where they are, and then talking to scientists and really understanding. I think we all want to be compassionate, and want to help people, get over traumatic brain injuries or experiences that you get wrapped up in your limbic system, or pain that you suffer with every single day.
Yeah, well, so campaigning.
Are you?
I'm not a consumer, admittingly, and I'm very public about this. Like, I played around with it in high school, right? And I think my first time smoking was trying to impress a girl, right? Because she did. Yeah, like most stupid things, it's done over a girl. But as a user myself, no, it's not something that's been for me. I think the closest thing I've taken to it was melatonin with some THC mixed into it or something to that effect, and it was drops, and actually worked really, really well. But now I just take magnesium to get some better sleep.
I am an advocate of, because I use CBD oil.
That's what it was, CBD.
On my hands and things like that. I think it has incredible medicinal value, and we'd even looked at Nature Nate's doing a honey with CBD, in it. But we didn't feel like it aligned, with the brand, just from a brand perspective.
Yeah,
And so it was early on, and so there were some people that felt like didn't know the difference between CBD and THC.
Yeah.
And so we're like, I
think
that's not
most don't.
us.
I mean, even mainly right now, I'm talking that it had THC in the drops, and it probably was CBD. So we talked about this earlier off camera about these companies that voluntarily inject themselves into politics, right? And we were kind of laughing about it. What's your? I mean, as far as I know, your company has never been political, right? And you even cited that as part of why you left. You couldn't be associated with the brand because you don't want the brand to be associated with politics now. Do you see that happening a lot? And has that made things harder for consumers and just everyday people and having to choose products and just getting into these political spats with their neighbors because such and such brand or such and such car company has decided to take a political stance on whatever? Or I was joking around, like a shoe company decides what their opinions are in the war in Iran,
I think sometimes when you're in leadership, you forget why you're in leadership. And so sometimes as a politician, you start talking about stuff that you think that your base would love. And so but it's not really in your purview of responsibility. And so staying on message is important, as a politician or even as a brand. And as the CEO, or a board of directors for a brand, especially if it's a for-profit company, then you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders. And sometimes when you go and wade in, a la Budweiser, and you wade in and you have someone who is, head of marketing that might have a more agenda-driven motivation behind them than fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, man, that is just a horrible business practice, poor leadership from the CEO down. And so I never wanted to create situations where people would question the motivation, for why we weighed into something that was controversial. The areas where I chose to want to make a difference was going investing into things, from a philanthropy standpoint. Like on Mother's Day, we gave, I think, $10,000 to 5 battered housewives shelters. Or we would give to, food pantries, or I had Beatitudes at Nature Nate's. And so they were core beliefs that I was trying to inspire our people to. And so Jesus had the, Sermon on the Mount. He had the Beatitudes. And so that was kind of our play, the BEE attitudes. Nice. I always say, you didn't know Jesus was a beekeeper? But, I wanted to inspire our people. And you think, most corporate core beliefs are like strategy, efficiency. Ours were love, kindness, faithfulness, creativity, generosity. And, I wanted to inspire our people to try to make an impact in the lives of other people, especially in the area of generosity. When you have people that make 15, 20 bucks an hour, there are always people who are less fortunate. And so to see those core beliefs embraced inside of Nature Nate's, and then mobilizing them out, like when the hurricane was down in Houston, all those people were homeless. Our people put together, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000 of their own money. We went to Costco and Sam's, filled up a U-Haul and drove it down. They drove it down there and went and distributed. And that wasn't something that I was pushing them to do. That's something that they felt led to do. So if I'm going to expend energy in capital for a company that I am in charge of, I want it to be to make a good, positive difference, not something that could be viewed as agenda-driven. That's in competition with what your responsibilities are.
Touching on that, we were talking about companies and CEOs making political statements when they shouldn't be. You see that a lot in politics too. You'll have somebody who's maybe like the tax assessor of a county, and they're giving their political opinions about things or politicians or issues that are completely out of their realm.
Like the guy in New York that got arrested at the ICE facility. I think he was like a tax controller or something.
Right, and it's just like, why, right? Politics has become, or it seems to have become, very celebrity driven, where they're more concerned about like their ability to make a quick quip that is good marketing and advertising for them. Do you feel like somebody who's maybe not a Republican can vote for you, maybe a Democrat or a Libertarian or a moderate, can be comfortable voting for you because you're not going to inject your maybe right-wing views into the position?
My goal is to go and help give confidence in people in our food supply and to help farmers and ranchers. And you would, when I spoke Sunday at a church, demographically, you wouldn't, or even politically, you would think, this guy doesn't align with this. And yet I felt so loved and welcomed and embraced. They gave a standing ovation, at the end. But you know what? I have partnered with, I actually partnered with that church. They've got a big community garden, and I gave them an undisclosed amount of money a couple years ago, to help with their community garden. They've got a bunch of beehives in there. Well, Pastor James Hutchins, who started that church, New Life Church, he's got, and this is in Little Elm, he's got a food pantry where people in the community can come through and drive through and get food. He's got an event center that he allows the community to use. And he's got this garden to teach kids the importance of healthy food. And then they take those vegetables that they grow there. And it's a big fruit garden, big vegetable garden. And then they take that and they go distribute it, around there. And so, food is not political. But unfortunately, food is privileged based on your economic position in life. And, you should be able to be financially disadvantaged and have access to good, clean, nutritious, healthy food, and that doesn't mean it has to be organic. I mean, the goal of agriculture is to provide good, quality, healthy food to everybody. And then marketing of some is to then have another level, of organic. So we want to instill the confidence back into the supply chain from, the farm all the way to the fork, that people have the confidence that what they're eating is the best thing. We've got the best supply chain, the best agriculture, of any place in the world. And it's very safe. And we just need to make people realize it and know it. And that's one of the things, we'll do if God allows us to be the ag commissioner.
Now, the ag commissioner position is a statewide position. And as you know, Texas is bigger than a lot of countries. It's a lot of people to market to, a lot of people to campaign to. What's the plan? What's the strategy in getting your name out? Like, obviously, well known in Collin County.
Sid's watching this video.
What's the next big stop for you?
Obviously, politics is about money and about making connections with people. Sid's got 1 million people on his Facebook. He's got huge social media. I saw a podcast, I don't know if it's yours or someone else. He said, I tweet 150 times a week. And I was like, that's a lot of hours that you're spending.
Only Brian Harrison can compete with that. But yeah,
it's like, stop doing that. Get back to being ag commissioner. Patty and I, we're about to be empty nesters. Our last child's going off to college. And she said the other day when we were talking about running politics, she said, I thought we were going to travel once, we were empty nesters.
We're going to travel the state.
I said, we're going to go to 254 counties, babe. So you know what? Honestly, I love people. I love getting out, meeting people. I love that part of it. I love hearing people's stories and capturing those in my brain, but, and highlighting people. I was out in West Texas last week. We were out at cattle ranchers. We've been out at farms. We were down at Texas A&M talking to Dr. Slater about the bee crisis. We've lost 80% of bees in Texas in the past year.
Yeah.
In the year.
Yeah.
65%.
A lot of people don't know that.
65% across the United States in the past year. It's $680 million of economic impact, about, $250 million on the bee side, and then the balance on honey production and pollination. So, the question is, what's happening to the bees? And in some sense, it's related to what they eat. And are bees the canary in the coal mine?
Yeah, I mean, you can attribute that to the unhealthiness of the average American citizen now.
Absolutely.
Things are
Screen time, just being stagnant,
idle,
not getting out. Thankfully we have RFK and others trying to get things out, like SB 25, get things out of our diet that have negative health consequences. And I think that technology, today is really helping to do a better understanding of these things and the role that they play in health. It's those type of thought processes where I feel like I can invest my time. I'm not going to tweet 150 times a week because I'm going to be busy trying to fix issues like what's happening to all the bees. And that's what we need, and that's ultimately come back full circle. That is why I'm running, because there's too much needs and too great of things that need to get done.
So what's the best way for a Texan watching this to connect with you, ask questions, or connect with you on a personal level?
Yeah. My personal cell phone, 214-642-9367. I had it on the back of every bottle of honey from 1997 until 2014. It's the same phone number I have today. Or you can go NateSheetsForTexas.com or Nate Sheets for Texas on all the different social media. And I wouldn't say that we've got this massive, robust, highly sophisticated, platform, and we're kind of figuring it out as we go. Going from business into politics is pretty much night and day. What you do over years, you wind up doing in weeks or months.
Yeah.
And so just trying to navigate, all of that is what we're doing right now. But, and then, man, if you want me to come speak at your group or your church, text me, email me, and I would love to come in and listen, to how I can help you guys be healthier and be more impactful.
Well, Nathan Sheets, thanks for your time.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.